Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome back. Today we have with us Earnest James. He is a family man, father, and friend with a heart for people. As a podcaster, mentor, and TEDx speaker, Ernest has dedicated his life to inspiring and uplifting others. His mission is to help others deal, heal, and fulfill. You deal with your problems, heal from your pain, fulfill your purpose. He spreads a message of hope and healing wherever he goes. He believes that we must heal ourselves. When we heal ourselves, we heal our families. Our families heal our communities, and our communities heal the world. I absolutely love that. Welcome, Ernest.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a joy for me to be here.
Yeah, I was on your podcast and it's just fun because we had such a great conversation on yours. I was like, you got to come back and we got to be on mine. So we're going to talk about something today, and I'm going to let you just jump right into it. And it is on a very heavy topic, but
Mhm.
you put a spin on it that I'm very curious to hear about. It's your F.U.N method for when you are having suicidal thoughts. So I
Yes,
know a
yes,
very deep, heavy topic, but you're going to make it informative. And I don't want to say fun. I can't say that,
right,
but you can, I'm sure. So tell us,
right.
just get right into it.
Yeah. So I did my first TEDx talk not too long ago, and the name of it was "How to Have Fun with Suicidal Ideation," and I named it that for a reason. And fun is an acronym. It's not just having fun, but it's an acronym, so there's meaning behind it. But I wanted it to get attention. To get people's attention. And when I did the TEDx talk, when they published it, they changed the name. But I'm like, all right, cool. But the message is still out. The message is still the same. But before I get into that, I'm going to go a little bit back into my backstory, which is how I even came to it. So, a couple of years ago, I was living, just living my life, right? Me and I was married at the time. I had my daughter. We were young, probably still in our 20s at that time. Hadn't been married long, but we already was on our way. We had bought our first house already. We had all the things, right? I had the toys, I had the motorcycle, I had the truck, she had the car. So we started off, with a bang and really pressing forward. And just young and happy at that time, should I say. um, but we got a phone call, and the phone call was my wife's mom, which my mother-in-law at the time. She had to go to the hospital because she was feeling some type of way. And when she went to the hospital, we found out that she had cancer. I was very close to her. Her name was Chris. I was very close to Chris. We had a great relationship, even outside of my wife. Like we would go out to breakfast together and dinner together, and just really had a great bond. And I really loved her. And so when we found out that she had cancer, when they found it, it was already in the last stages. And
Mm.
so it's like, okay, um, we're dealing with that. We're helping her, kind of get through that season. And unfortunately, she did end up passing away. When she passed away, that was hard on not only me, but it was hard on my wife at the time also, because she was the only child and her father wasn't really present in her life. So her mom was all she had. And so when losing her mom, that took a toll on her. She began to change, her personality changed, a lot of changes, happened real fast. Then at that time too, I'm a bricklayer by trade. So I work in the construction industry, and the economy went down. And so that affected our family financially. So we got financial stress, we got the stress of losing my mother-in-law, which started adding to other stress within the marriage. And then I found myself, facing divorce. Um, Not long after that, within maybe a 3 years time, I got another phone call. And this phone call was just as devastating as the first one, which was my mom having to go to the hospital and then finding out that my mom also had cancer.
Wow.
And unfortunately, my mom would end up passing away as well. So I found myself in this space. I'm dealing with the death of two women that I love dearly, right? I'm dealing with going through a divorce. I'm dealing with going definitely in debt because now there's no work, and just finding myself in this space where now I'm going through a deep depression, and I'm like, man, I don't know what I can do. I'm facing all these different obstacles, and there's nothing I can do about it. right? And so now I'm feeling hopeless and helpless. And I'm like, you know what? Things would be better if I wasn't here. Like I really could just, end it myself, and then I won't be a burden to my family. I won't be a burden to, all of these other, spaces where I used to be very active and impressionable, but now I'm going through this. So now I'm kind of withdrawing myself and just going through all of these personal issues that I was having. And there was a turning point one day. I'm sitting at my house with my daughter. My daughter's my only biological child. And at that time, she's maybe like 7 or 8. And we're sitting in the front yard, and I'm watching her play. I got the little kiddie pool out and the sprinklers on. So she's jumping in the pool and she jumps out the pool and run through the sprinklers. And I'm just watching her play, from the porch, and she's in the front yard. And in the midst of her playing, she just stops and she runs over to me and she's crying. And I'm like, why are you crying? Like nothing happened. Like I'm watching you play. And what she said to me was, she said, I miss my grandmothers.
Mm-hmm.
And that it hit me for several reasons. It hit me, one, to even recognize that at the young age that she was, I don't know if she really understood death at that time, but she did understand that both of her grandmothers weren't around anymore. She understood that, and for me, knowing how I was dealing with it, with losing them, and then seeing how she was dealing with it, and then recognizing to myself with everything that I was dealing with personally, of course, that she didn't know about. I'm like, what would happen to my daughter if I'm not here? Like, this
Right.
is my only child, and she was a daddy's girl. Like everywhere I went, I had my daughter with me, and so we're together all the time. And I'm like, what would happen to her if I'm not here, And so that kind of began me, sent me on this journey of really saying, you know what, I got to hang around, I got to hang around, which kind of led into the F.U.N method, what I call the F.U.N method, which is what helped me get out, to get to the other side of it. So I started, regaining my willingness to live, right? And so I have friends and family that came and began to, kind of pull me out of this space. Like, you know what, we're gonna get outside. We're gonna go, we're not gonna, just stay in this depression. Let's get out and live, and started going through that. And so I started going through bereavement support. And as I'm going through a bereavement, I really loved it there. I loved my experience there. They loved me. I think my session was like 8 weeks or something like that. But I ended up staying there for over a year. And I became a volunteer and just stayed there for over a year. And after that year, I left, and then I started a nonprofit called Ann Christine Charities, which is named after my mom, whose name was Ann, and then Christine, who was my mother-in-law at the time. And what I did was started having bereavement support groups myself and in my community. Um, and so when we got to this F.U.N method, is what I kind of realized was the thing that helped me get through that time period the most. And so the word F.U.N is an acronym, F-U-N, which stands for Focus, Unite, and Normalize. And so the focus was, I remember going through my depression and really going through, the suicidal ideations and looking at all the things in my life that was going wrong that I could not fix. I couldn't bring my mother back. I couldn't bring my mother-in-law back. I couldn't save my marriage. I couldn't bring my job back. Like all of these things
Mm-hmm.
that was affecting my life on every turn, and there was nothing I could do about it. But when I looked at my daughter, and after having that experience with her, what I said was, I can't do anything about my situation. Like all of these things, I can't change none of it, but I can affect her experience. And so the F stands for focus. So I took my focus off of me and I put it onto her. And I said, I'm going to stay here no matter what, because I'm going to do my best to make sure her life is better. Make sure that whatever she's dealing with, as she's dealing with her own grief, as she's growing as a young lady and a child at that time, I'm going to do my best to be the best father I can be for her. And I'm going to stay here as long as I can within my power to make sure she's okay. And so that's what the F stands for, the focus. And now I have had conversations with therapists, and they one in particular was telling me, like, well, Ernest, we teach our clients to focus on themselves so that they can work on themselves and whatever things that they need to do in order to get out of their depression. And what I told her is what I share here. I'm not a therapist. You know what I mean? So I can't say who's right or who's wrong, but I can say what works for me. So wherever you have to put that focus, if you have to put it on yourself to focus on yourself to get better, if you have to for a time put that focus on someone else in order to get the strength to continue, wherever you need to focus, put the focus there. You
Well,
know,
and I look at it like you said, you didn't put the focus on yourself, but in a way you did, because taking care of your daughter gave you your purpose back.
Mhm.
And so in doing that, you were putting
Yeah.
the focus on yourself. You were healing by giving yourself purpose. And so I look at it kind of like that was, yes, it was, the focus was on helping her, but it gave you a mission. It gave you that hope back that you could make her better. It gave you a purpose. It gave you a reason to live. So
Yeah.
I don't think I I'm not a therapist either, but I think that
Right.
was totally healthy.
Yeah, and I think it was too, and it goes back to the reason why I think that's important. Well, like you said, getting that purpose back, because when we find ourselves in the depression and looking at all these things that we can't change, we begin to feel so hopeless and helpless. And so when we find that one thing that, you know what, I can make a difference in this area, then as we begin to pour ourselves into those things and begin to see the positive change, then again, it does give us back, some of our feeling back, some of our zest for life back, you know what I mean? And our purpose back. And yeah, so it may sound differently, but yeah, I agree with you 100%. Like it still works for our betterment, And so, yeah, so wherever you have to focus, you know
Yep.
what I
And
mean?
you couldn't give to your daughter unless you were well. So you
Right.
had to show up for your daughter for yourself, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense, but
Yes,
yeah.
it makes plenty of sense. You have to um show up for others in order to show up for you,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, if it wasn't for, and I'll even take it a little further, because if it wasn't for the others who showed up for me, before I had that strength, those friends and family members that came and got me literally and pulled me out the house, like, we're going outside, we're going to the park, we're going to go watch kids play, like those little things that bring joy back into your life, they came and pulled me out when I didn't have the strength for myself, and so even them coming to my rescue in that space, and then giving me just that little spark that said, okay, now let me try to pour into my daughter, and it all works together.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're someone who's supporting someone that's going through depression or suicidal ideations, or maybe if you're the person yourself, wherever you have to focus on to get you the most strength to carry on, then we want to focus, right?
Amen. Yep.
So the U stands for unite, right? So it's F.U.N, is focus, unite, and normalize. So unite, that goes back to my number one, my family and friends that began to, work on me and to pull me out, but even more directly when I started going to the bereavement group. To be in a space with people who understood what I was going through, people who were going through the same thing that I was going through, some even going through worse than what I was going through, right? And I remember just being in that space, and the families that came. Some had lost loved ones, due to sickness, like me, but then there were some who loved ones had died in accidents. One young lady had two daughters, and both of her daughters were murdered in her home, and it just so many different people that's dealing with so many different things in the space of losing loved ones by different ways. But when we all came together, to grieve together, to talk together, to work through our emotions together, and just gave all of us so much strength and so much hope in order to help us to move forward. And so I really think that's a very important, that whatever you're going through, and not just, losing someone, but even in the spaces, positive spaces, should I say, community is so important in your life, and I'm big on community anyway, because I come from a large family. My grandmother was the baby of 10 siblings. And then she had, no, my grandmother was the baby of 12 siblings, and then she had 10 kids. And then my
Whoa.
mom was one of the 10, and then my mom had 9, you know.
Wow.
And so the amount of family of cousins and aunts and uncles, my family is huge. So I've always been in that space of loving community because of family. But as I've grown into an adult and going into different spaces of the podcasting world, the speaking world, being a mentor, just all these different spaces where the communities are built in, and you go and you meet all these different people who are like-minded on the same mission with the same purpose. It really does something to you. It really supports you. It really helps you to regain that love for life. You
Oh,
know,
absolutely. And there's nothing to be said. You can only say good things about community. And not only that, when you're dealing with a bunch of people that have lost someone, they're all compassionate, they all have empathy, and they all look at it with no judgment
mm-hmm.
because they understand. And it's a great place to be, to have a community like that. So yes, I implore you all, I beg you, go if you're struggling with anything. And there's groups out there for everything.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And that's one thing that I enjoy about social media, and I don't enjoy a lot of stuff about it, but I do enjoy that, right? Like now access to whatever you need is right there. You can easily find it because there are groups for just about anything you can think of. There's a group for it, there's a podcast for it, there's a community somewhere that's meeting on whatever it is that you're into or whatever it is that you're looking for. But in my journey, that bereavement group played such a huge part to me. And one of the ways that affected me was, and I believe that God has a way of putting things in our life, right? That we might not even recognize at the moment, right? But now I would say our purpose leaves clues. And so there's little things that God puts in our life that we don't recognize until we line ourselves with our purpose. And it was like, oh, that's why that happened, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I shared this story that when I was about 17 or 18, um, I was young, about 17 or 18, me and my cousin go to the corner store right by in our neighborhood, and it's like maybe like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And we walk to the corner store. We're at this store. We get in whatever we were getting, and it's probably like 5 or 6 people that was already at the register. By the time we was getting up, came into the store, and these 2 gentlemen walk in, and one guy was maybe like a regular sized guy, maybe 5'3", 5'4", whatever, regularly small guy. The other guy that was with him was like a big football player like guy. I mean, this guy was huge. And 2 African American guys, and they walk in, and the big guy is crying. I mean, like bawling in public. You know what I mean? Like, which is you don't you rarely ever see that, right? And so I'm looking at this guy, and so he's come in. The smaller guy is trying to console him, and so they come into the store, and they ended up right in front of us when we got in line for the register, and it's probably like 5 people in front of him, and he's crying, and the younger guy, or should I say, the smaller guy is trying to console him, and just by the conversation, I couldn't tell who it was, but I could tell it was a woman who had passed away, and so they're having this conversation, and he's crying, and he's kind of feeling his emotions, and then he turns and he takes his fist and he hits the top of the counter with his fist. And it's like one of those moments in the movies where everything stops. You know what I mean? And it's like
Right.
he hits the counter, and it's like boom, echoes throughout the store. Everyone stops and is like turns and looks at him. And he's like, I just want some cigarettes. And so everyone that was in front of him just like moved out the way. It's like, hey, get this guy some cigarettes. And so he moved up to the front of the counter. He paid for his cigarettes, him and the other guy. They walked out the store. I never seen them before then. Don't think I've ever seen them after. And I was 18 years old. And by the time my mom passed away, again, I'm in my 20s, late 20s. And that story came back to me when I started going through the bereavement. And I'm like, oh, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the other reasons why it stood out to me, because in my time being there with my session that I had, and then a year that I stayed in bereavement, there was only one African American family that came through, the sessions. And so that's what kind of pressed me to say, okay, I want to be able to take this to my community, because either we don't know or it's just not being offered. And so
Right.
that's when I started the Anne Christine Charities and began to offer it that to my community as a community, because like we need it, because I know we're dying, I know we're losing family members, I know we're getting older, and we have to be able to process it as a community. And so I started the Anne Christine Charities for that time, at that time, to bring that resource to the community.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah. And so lastly, the end, which also goes back to the bereavement. When I was in bereavement, there was a term that I had never heard before that they brought to us, and that is your new normal, right? And it's the process and the thought process of things will never be the same. Like you've lost this person, this person is no longer here with you. So it'll never be the same as it was, but it can be normal. It'll just be a new normal. And so embracing that thought process of, okay, what does my life look like now? Right? My mom is not here. My mother-in-law is no longer here. I'm grieving the loss of my marriage, like all of these things. Like, okay, it'll never be like it was, but it can be normal and it can be happy. I can find happiness again. And so just taking in that thought and accepting the parts of it that I couldn't change, but moving forward in the areas that I could. And, I began to pour into those areas, with the nonprofit, pouring into that, work once again picked up. And, even though I was divorced, I ended up getting remarried, and, just different things started happening, and just begin to find life again. Like, no, was it the same? No, totally different than it was a couple of years ago. But now this is my new normal. And now I can accept it as it is and begin to find the joy that is already there. But because of what I was going through, I was just too blind to see it. But as you start working through those emotions and working through, what you can change, what you can't change, the things you want to accept, the things that you want to, adjust, so that it meets your needs, we will again find our normal, find our new normal in that space. And so that's the fun method, focus, unite, and normalize. And that's what worked for me. And I just think it is definitely helpful for other people.
Well, and it's super simple. It's
Mhm.
not like this 20-step process. It's literally focus, find people to focus with, and
Yeah.
make the new normal. That new normal, I love that, because my father actually died on Christmas Day.
Mm.
And I thought Christmas would never be joyous again.
Yeah.
Like I just was like, he always came to my house. It didn't matter where I lived. He spent Christmas Day with me and my kids, even though he had two other kids. He had seven other grandkids, all that stuff.
Mhm.
So it's right. I was like, I can either be sad on Christmas Day and be like, this is the day that Grandpa should have been with us, or we can make new traditions. We can make new things. We can make a new normal.
Yeah.
And I love that you put it so simply, because it took me a couple of years to really wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
Christmas was miserable for me for a few years.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things when you think about it, that the impact of losing someone. So my mom's birthday was in May, right? So we got Mother's Day, we got my mom's birthday, then right after that you got she passed in June. I think she passed right, no, not June. She passed in July. She passed right after the 4th of July. She passed on July 5th, And so it's like you got Mother's Day, you got her birthday, you got my birthday, then you got the 4th of July, you got all these, times within this short time period that we would have been together. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like all of these days we would have been together. And so every year is definitely noticeable. You know what I mean? Because it's like, everything would have happened, and we surrounded a lot of our lives around my mom. because her and my dad, but more so her because she was the mom, you know what I
Right.
mean? And so you got all of these days that's like, okay, what can we do? One of the things that my mom did when we were younger, especially having 9 kids, right? So you got 9 kids spread out throughout the year. So it's almost like you have a birthday party every year. I mean, every month, pretty much. So
Hmm.
it's like that comes really expensive. So I remember she was like, all right, we're not doing this no more. So what we started doing was having one big birthday party a year, right? And we celebrate
Oh,
everybody's birthday at the same time. And so that was something that she started doing. And now, especially after her passing, it was like, okay, what can we do to really, enjoy, what mom meant to us and really, keep her alive. And so we started making sure that we do one big family gathering a year. I mean, we do multiple, but one that's like, this is the
the
one
big
that
one.
we're going to
Yep.
celebrate, mom. Yeah. And so that just became a staple in my family now. It was like, all right, especially when it started getting around June 5th, it's like, okay, it's getting around that time that mom passed, when are we doing, what are we doing? What are we going to do? And so we just start having a big celebration, all the nieces and nephews, and my dad comes, and all of us just get together and just have a big family gathering. So
That's awesome. I'm very envious of your huge family. I have a brother and sister and a couple nieces and nephews, but my brother is 58 and he
mm,
is the oldest living relative on my family. We don't,
mm,
so it's like, wow, we had a very small. My dad was an only child. My mom was one of two or three, like we don't have that. I absolutely love that. I had friends in college who had like 8 brothers and sisters, and that is the community. That should be
yeah.
all you need for a community.
Yeah, my one of my friends, his mom and dad, it was 16 of them, right? They had 16. And then my sister, one of my sisters, my second oldest sister, I think she has 14. And so just is,
So
and
many.
I be watching, like I see different things. Like I was watching a podcast earlier today, and the family was on. They were talking to the husband and wife, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we got a big family. We got 4 kids." I'm like, "4?" You know what I mean? I'm like, "That's not big." You know what
Oh my goodness. Yeah,
I
that's crazy. That is awesome. I love it. Absolutely love it.
mean? Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great.
So it's been, it's been a journey. No, it's been a journey, but I am loving the space that I'm in now, and how I get to pour out into, the communities in which I serve. I was able to start a podcast. I have 2 podcasts now, but I was able to start my first podcast, which is the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, which I had you on, which I thank you for being a guest. I started that podcast, and that was great. And then I was able to start the Girl Dad Discussions podcast because, again, my daughter is my only biological child. And part of my story, a couple of years ago, when I started to realize, kind of focus on my dating history a little bit after my divorce, I realized that every woman I've ever dated was a fatherless daughter throughout my whole life. And so it was like, all right, what can I do to help this community? And so I wrote a book called ebook called The Four Core, which is the 4 core values that every daughter should get from her father. And I wrote
Mm.
that, and then I started the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, where I invite other girl dads on, and we talk about the daddy daughter relationships. And sometimes I have the daughters to come on and talk about those relationships in order to combat the narrative of the absent father and the fatherless daughter. And so I've been able to do that, being able to get into some speaking and serving in different communities, and I just love it. I just love I'm glad that I was able to make it to the on the other side
Yeah.
of the suicidal ideations, because I could have very, very well taken my life during that time with everything that I was dealing with at that time. But now that I'm on the other side of it and I get to help people, in every different areas of my life, and I'm really enjoying being able to have an impact on the people that I've have here. And I remember doing my TEDx talk and talking about the fun method. And when it was over, at the end, the host was, coming up, and she was, thanking each and every one of us. And one of the things that she said on the mic, she was like, "I'm so grateful that you didn't take your life, because now we get to have this story and this resource." And yeah, it means a lot. It means a lot to be able to share my story in a way that could help others.
Well, and yes, and your podcast does it. And I love the idea of the daddy daughter podcast because, yeah, it's just so necessary. And I resonated. I listened to a couple. I resonated very much with that, with my dad. My dad and I were very close. But yeah, it's incredible. So you're serving all these communities. So if people want to reach out and they want to talk to you and they want to have you come speak, I'm sure you'll travel. I'm sure you'll do whatever.
Yeah.
How do they reach out to you?
The easiest way is to go to info at dealhealfulfill.org. And that's just my email address. That's the quickest way to get to me. But then we have the website at dealhealfulfill.org, which is the website. Or you can follow me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. You can look me up as Earnest James just by my name, or you can look me up for at the Deal to Heal podcast. And then if you will go to YouTube, it's the Deal to Heal podcasting network on
And I'll
YouTube.
put all of
Everything,
that in all of
yeah,
the show notes because
everything, yeah.
you
So
have some, yeah, you have some cool places. I was checking out. You got some swag gifts and you got some
yeah,
t-shirts and
yeah,
merchandise and you got
yeah,
all kinds of stuff, which is amazing.
yeah, and it's all around the mission and the purpose of helping people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with their problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill their purpose, as which is basically my story. My coming through to get to the other side, and now fulfilling my purpose to bring hope and healing to everyone. And so all of my things have that thing to it.
Absolutely. I love it. So if you've given us a million golden nuggets, but if you had to give the listeners, assuming that they're coming from all different places, but they all need to deal, heal, and fulfill because we
Mhm.
all do, what would be your like final words of wisdom or something to take with them for the day?
Um, so um, hmm, my I would say this, you know, we all go through a lot of things. And so I would advise all of us to not run, not hide from what we're feeling. I know right now, mental health is a hot topic, and it should be, and for a lot of times it wasn't addressed the way that it's being addressed now. Um, and not to just to piggyback on that, but definitely I know how important it is because I know what the part that it plays in my life. So I would say, please don't ignore how you feel. Don't ignore, your emotions. Don't ignore your tears. Don't ignore your grief, but live in it and experience it, but also realize that you're not alone, that you're not the only one that's dealing with, what you're going through. You're not the only one that's out here. So become one with yourself, express your emotions, express how you're feeling, and look for that community to support you in the midst of what you're going through, because we are out here, we do exist. And I think that's the biggest um, thing that we can do for ourselves is getting in the right community with like-minded people to give you that strength and support when you don't feel like you have the strength, when you don't feel like you have the support to push yourself through. Get yourself in that right community and allow them to uplift you, allow them to love on you, allow them to lift you up until you have the strength to stand on your own. So that would be my advice.
Well, that was very good advice. And it's true because that we hear the expression, you can't heal if you don't feel. And that's where it starts. But you have to feel and then deal and then heal and then
Yeah.
fulfill. So, so you started it off perfectly to your segue into what you preach and what you teach. So
Yeah.
awesome. So thank you so much for coming on, Ernest.
No problem. No problem. Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. For everybody else out there, you heard it. Practice the fun method. Focused, unity or unite, and new
Normalize.
normalize,
Yep.
normalize. Focus, unite, normalize. I was trying to think. I was like, new normal. So focus,
It
unite,
still works
normal.
either or.
Yeah, we got it. Fun. This is fun in everything. And it can be
Yes.
applied to everything you do. It doesn't have to just be when you're that down and you're
Yeah.
actually thinking about ending. Like it doesn't have to be that bad. You can start this process anywhere, anytime, at any stage of your life that you're in. Anyone. And like he said, you're worth it. I mean, you are so worth it. And every second that you spend getting closer to that other side of just joy and being fulfilled is so, so worth it.
Yes.
So worth it. So thank you guys, and we will see you again soon. Bye.